been another tough day in Victoria for those attempting to nail this virus. Shortly, I'll go through the latest dramas and the political fallout between members of the National Cabinet today as well. Our special guest tonight will be the WA Premier, Mark McGowan. Lots to cover with him, from his doubts about JobSeeker, his refusal to reopen borders and his views on the GST as well. We'll be looking at the Prime Minister's lethal rollout of a new defence capability with some incisive analysis from former Major General Senator Jim Molan. And we'll look at why one of the most famous greenies has turned his back on climate alarmism. But first, not a day goes by at the moment without aspects of COVID-19 shocking members of the public, causing a lot of angst and turning into a political bun fight. We've certainly had all of that in the past 24 hours. The day began in tears for one Melbourne mayor who, like most of us, was shocked by how many Victorians have refused to take a test for the virus.
Makes me feel incredibly angry. Sorry, and it's one of those things because we have the most resilient, amazing traders here, and it's kind of like going in the last 2 weeks to a wedding followed by a funeral, and I really hope that they are going to be resilient enough to get through this again. But it makes me incredibly angry when people won't take the test, because this is our community. It's our local economy. They're local mums and dads, running these small businesses, and they've done it so bloody tough. So I just think it's the height of entitlement, to be honest, not to take the test. And I would urge everyone in our community, when asked, to take that test.
I couldn't agree more. So what's behind the fact that 1,000 people won't be tested?
So the main one was for around kids, but then there was some misunderstanding about what the test was about and why it was being taken, and so explaining about the COVID-19 element and why it's important is a really key component. This is a very multicultural area of Melbourne, many different ethnic groups and language groups, and so not only the translation but also the cultural sensitivity is a really important component.
Sorry, but these are all just excuses. And they're excuses that are irrelevant because all states and territories have the right to enforce these tests. The classification of an emergency gives Victoria that power.
There are ways of enforcing. All the Chief Health Officers in all of the states and territories have those powers if they need to use them.
But of course, the Victorian Premier is refusing to exercise that right. Another soft approach, I would have thought, from the Andrews government and their handling of the virus. And of course, apart from facing the problem of Victorians making excuses for not taking a test, the overnight infections continue to rise. Today, the tally reached 73, their third highest tally of overnight infections since this virus first surfaced, and it includes 20 community infections as well. Meanwhile, in New South Wales, the warning to Victorians about not travelling to New South Wales went to a new level today, with the New South Wales Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, reasserting what was announced by the Premier, and he has threatened to fine or even jail those who creep across the border.
If anybody decides to try and slip out of the Victorian hotspot lockdowns and slip across the border into New South Wales, it won't be a welcome they'll be getting. They'll be getting the opportunity to have 6 months in jail and $11,000 fine.
$11,000 fine. And then there was the politics. The Queensland Premier's swipe at the Prime Minister yesterday over how much he picked on Queensland for not reopening her borders was not going to go unnoticed.
There's an election in Queensland, David, so I think we can sort of file that under those comments, under those sorts of things. We all understand that. But let me say this about the National Cabinet, and I acknowledge the contribution of all the Premiers and Chief Ministers. And Stephen Marshall, and I made similar comments about their border changes yesterday as I did in Queensland. But everyone has worked together. It doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything. National Cabinet has never had a position of internal borders.
Now, shortly we'll speak with the WA Premier about his refusal to reopen his borders to all Australians. But, Richo, please explain why someone would not do their bit by being tested? And if it is a language problem, what, we have an inability to supply some kind of, you know, translator for these suburbs? We know where certain migrant groups collect. It can't be that hard, can it?
No, it's not that hard, and I don't believe the excuse. You know, you've got anti-vaxxers around the place, and they're completely mad and completely selfish, don't care what damage they do to other people, and you've got some people the same here. I would treat them pretty harshly. I have no problem with a policeman grabbing someone's arm and holding it while they get jabbed or whatever. You have to make sure that people comply with this, because your own selfishness might mean that a whole heap of people get gravely ill. And that means bugger you. We've got to go around you, through you, over you, whatever the preposition is.
Yeah, it's a paper up the nose, and if you don't like that, I'm sure they could get access to a saliva test, because they are being used at the moment as well. So do you think Daniel Andrews should enact the power that he has to make sure that people take tests?
Absolutely. I think this has to be compulsory.
And on the other side of the ledger, it's interesting to see him yesterday, Richo, call for an inquiry into the way quarantine operated. This has been Victoria's ruby princess, hasn't it? Yeah,
there obviously has been a failure. And the good thing about Andrews is he's not afraid to find out what the failure is. You know, his view is, well, I don't care if people are going to criticise the government. I need to know what went wrong. And I think that's what makes him so popular. He's prepared to take on hard decisions, and he doesn't blink.
No, he doesn't.